me take you on to a journey. For the next 30 minutes, half of the journey will be my personal journey, and I invite you to share that with me. And as Valentina very kindly introduced, you'll get some insights into what this title and term and self-acclaimed position of being a social entrepreneur. So I'll be sharing a few slides. And as Dr. Love has mentioned on chat, if there are thoughts that come up, it will be great if you note them down even on chat. We'll collect them all later. And as we promised, after 30 minutes, we'll have time to actually have an interaction. And that's the part which I'm most looking forward to as well. So here are my slides. Okay. Now I just get a thumbs up if you can see that, if some of you can see that. Yes? All right. Thanks, Chris. Okay. So we have the title of the talk, Appreciating Where You Are Today and the steps that you're going to make. This is discovering purpose in life and career for me in social enterprise. Since I was coming to TASIS and now virtually, I had to put myself back when I was at high school. This is my high school in Delhi. It was called Modern School or Modern High School. I spent 18 years there from junior school to the senior school, so very much similar to TASIS. Interestingly, Modern School also has a boarding school as well as a day school as well. And these are some of my classmates and friends, Tarini and Shweta, who graduated with me from high school. While I was there, I had two dreams, at least those two that I recall. The first dream was to swim for India. And if I have to be very, very honest, it was much more fun swimming from a high school. As you see, there are friends at the background in our school uniforms cheering you on. We had a 50-meter swimming pool, absolutely spoiled and extremely lucky to have that in my high school growing up. And the swimming races at high school were the most popular. It made winning fun, and you were allowed to miss a few classes if you were out for races. But swimming for India was still a dream. The second dream was to be a fourth-generation chartered accountant. And I have to say this here, but my great-grandfather began his practice of being a chartered accountant, which my grandfather and my father joined. And for perhaps since when I was 8, and when they asked you that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And remember, I was in India and you had to have the answer, a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, or an accountant. Mine was pretty straightforward. And why I was convinced to be a chartered accountant was because I used to help the lady at the corner of the streets who would be actually roasting corn. I don't know if any of you have actually had the experience of street food. I'm a great fan. And she would be roasting corn in the summer. It would be 45 degrees Celsius outside. And I would go and help her with the bookkeeping. This is what I heard happening at home. I lived with my grandparents and great-grandparents. We lived in a joint family. And I thought I could practice some of that skills and interest out there. I would do her bookkeeping, her ins and outs. Even though we have to be completely honest, as an Indian, her mental math was probably much better than mine. And all that extra paperwork was probably not needed. So the wish to be a chartered accountant, the wish to swim for India are dreams that gave me focus all through high school. And all this to say that the choices for me at university, perhaps what you're thinking of now, seemed very straightforward. I was looking to study economics. Valentina mentioned that I studied economics in 2 degrees. And I was looking for the chance to join a college and a swimming team where I could train and also one day hopefully compete. But what happens at university, right? Everything sort of goes over on its head. And I will call them and share with you 3 aha moments. The first aha moment was just joining university. And here I have to share with each of you that you already have a head start. I stayed at home till I was 18. I had never stayed outside my family with my parents till I was 18. My mother, she accompanied me for every swimming race, all up to university. And the one time I tried to complain and rebel, she told my swimming coach, and I had to do 3,000 meters of butterfly. And I still remember that. So after that, I stayed at home for university. I went to St. Stephen's College in Delhi, 40 minutes from home. And I read economics there for 3 years. What I didn't realize was the chance to swim for India, to be included in the training camp, staying away for 3 months, and achieving the dream in 1999 would actually alter life's plans. I had the chance to swim for India. I was lucky and fortunate to be winning silver, and I had the chance and advice to apply for the Rhodes Scholarship. The Rhodes Scholarships gives you a chance to study at Oxford. It's a 2-year scholarship, which is given for sporting prowess, but also academic rigor and a service to society. And I still do remember some of my application and essays from that point. My dream to be a chartered accountant was very much alive. I had studied economics. I was going to take these 2 years as a way to deepen international relations and look at how foreign direct investment would enable India's growth. I read politics, philosophy, and economics there for 2 years. Lots of economics, some politics, and very little philosophy at that point. And a summer internship or a research internship started to change my mind. And what I'd like to share with you here is my first aha moment. I suddenly realized after those 2 simulating years that I might not want to be an accountant. And what were the other choices? I went through high school, I went through growing up, I went through university, or the first 3 years of university, believing I would be joining the family practice. And here I was knowing what I didn't want to do, but not quite sure what I wanted to do. What are the other 2 choices for a graduate of economics? You can go into banking, or you can go into consulting, or you go for a graduate degree. So I started to peddle with the idea of thinking about a graduate degree. Oxford is very known for its graduate programs in development economics. There was an opportunity to study public policy, international development. But I felt I needed to go back home. It's the perspective, I believe, I needed to be when I was out of India and the chance to be back home. Going back to India was not as straightforward. I had the support of my parents who understood that after 2 undergraduate degrees, I'm looking for a master's degree. But at some point, I need to make up my mind, right? But I have to say there was a lot of pressure from the rest of society to have not wasted the Oxford degree. Not quite sure what to do. A college friend who read politics with me lent me a copy of a book called the Grameen Diaries. The Grameen Diaries was written actually by her father after he spent 1 week. It was a journal which he wrote after he spent 1 week at the Grameen Bank. I was very curious. I had spent a summer internship studying about the Millennium Development Goals at New York. I had read and academically researched some of these development models, but didn't have the first-hand experience. I decided to take a 2-week internship and go to Bangladesh. Some of you might ask me later on during the questions of why one would need to go to Bangladesh after being in India. Grameen Bank and Professor Yunus had created a model whereby poor women would be having access to formal finance. Sorry, I jumped a slide. Would be having access to formal finance. He was a professor of economics, and he had graduated and was teaching. He had graduated, done his PhD in the US, and he was teaching economics at the faculty of Chittagong, a province in Bangladesh. And when he saw women and small entrepreneurs undertaking activity and found out that they were borrowing money from money lenders or in the informal market, often selling the gold jewelry at over 5% a month, he went to his banker friends trying to convince them to give them a formal credit loan. And he was disappointed. He was disillusioned. Despite his credibility, not one formal bank was willing to come forward. At this point, Professor Yunus decided to lend what is now famously known as his 26 US dollars, perhaps saved back from his time in the US, to a group of 42 women. This is in the 1980s. After a year, each penny or each cent of that $26 came back to him, proving the creditworthiness and the incentive for poor people who are incentivized to invest in their businesses and to pay back. Today, Grameen Bank has over 1.5 million women entrepreneurs who not only access credit, but saving, insurance, education loans, health loans, university loans for their students and for their children. And Grameen Bank, if you are inquisitive to know, has a foundation in Italy. It has a foundation in Bologna, the Grameen Foundation in the US, and many other countries where it's helping its model to grow. I spent 2 weeks, or I applied for an internship there for 2 weeks, which became 2 months, and I ended up there for 3 months, amazed, inspired by different models of microfinance that I was exposed to. And as I'm reading my presentation, I will also tell you that I found a typo. There we go. All right, so we are back to looking at Grameen and Danone. So what is Grameen, what is Danone? And maybe some of you have heard of Danone, the dairy global manufacturer. Professor Yunus didn't stop at microcredit or microfinance. He went on to convince a global conglomerate, Danone, on a partnership. Danone would not typically look at low-income Bangladeshi families as their consumers, as their market, as their target market. I'm not sure when they're designing the products of cheese, they were actually looking to address this market. But there's a huge issue of malnutrition and iron deficiency, vitamin deficiency in Bangladesh, especially in the rural communities. Along with Grameen and Danone's partnership, they created a new product designed specifically for low-income families and school-going children to make yogurt accessible in that area. So what you're seeing here, and I had promised some little teaching moments in this, but this was an aha moment for me, was while we had grown up in Delhi, heard about traditional charities, and we had heard about traditional businesses, there was this emerging sector which was scratching the surface. The green bubbles that you see between traditional charity and traditional business. And what the experience at Grameen and hearing examples of the partnership with Danone taught us or explained or proved as a concept was the idea of social business or social enterprise, be it for-profit or non-for-profit. So my first longer internship, I was still not ready to go back to school. I was still unsure of next steps. I had met an Ashoka Fellow, also social entrepreneurs, an organization started by Bill Drayton in the US that selects fellows that are addressing a world's problem, let's say a social problem or environmental problem, with a novel business-like approach. I had met Dr. Sharma at Grameen Bank during a conference and decided to join and work with him on my return to India. And perhaps another example with the Rickshaw Bank. Many of you might have actually had the chance to sit on a rickshaw while traveling in Southeast Asia. perhaps even in big cities where it's becoming quite popular. Dr. Sharma was actually a veterinary doctor turned social entrepreneur after his aha moments. And what he understood while coming back from home or from his studio one day, from his after work one day, was the person driving his rickshaw was actually a seasonal migrant. He was coming in from the rural area to the urban area just for 200 days or 100, 150 days a year to earn some extra money. He was renting his rickshaw. So he was actually renting that cycle at that point for about 25 cents a day. And if you look at the 100 odd days that he actually works in the city, at 150 days he's living in the city, he would be spending about $50 a year. His earning is only 1.25 cents. So 25 cents goes to the repayment of the rickshaw, and that $1 a day is what he takes home. And he continues to do this year after year after year. So in the lifespan, if you were to take an average of even 10 years of the lifespan of somebody who works in the city for 10 years and rents a rickshaw, that would be about $500. How much does a rickshaw cost upfront? Less than $200. So Dr. Sharma in that moment was sort of intrigued, but are you not able to gather that much capital to purchase a rickshaw upfront? Or have you actually tried going to get a loan from a bank for $200 to repay the rickshaw? And that man replied, he said, it would not even be a dream. So in a similar gesture, very similar to Professor Yunus, Dr. Sharma took out the $200 and decided to create a group of 5 rickshaw pullers, give one. If the one returns it, it goes to the second one. If the second one returns it, it goes to the third one. So creating a revolving fund called the Rickshaw Bank. And at the end of 12 months, the rickshaw belonged to the puller. This is another example I'd like to share with you of creating an asset financing model. And that 25 cents a day, it goes back into saving for a rainy day. It goes back for the education for the children. But there is breaking that cycle of poverty. I worked with Dr. Sharma and his team for 6 months as they were trying to introduce new business models into their rickshaw bank. As you see on the right side of the screen, there is an advertisement. They realize that rickshaws have the biggest catchment of advertisement because of their traffic in a local area. A local business would not like to advertise on TV. They want to advertise very locally. So there was a new way to earn revenue for the rickshaw model. And the rickshaw model became a profit-making social enterprise. All the profits reinvested into the growth of the business. And today, Dr. Sharma is working on electric rickshaws in cities that are not as flat as Delhi, like Lugano, and also in Il Varese, where electric rickshaws also support the drivers and are also environmentally friendly. So now it was time to get a job. I think I was feeling the pressure of volunteering. I was very fortunate to have scholarships and I had no school debt to pay back. But I felt the sense of actually getting my hands dirty. I joined Care India, which I would have called absolutely my dream job. I worked under the assistant country director, which was Daniel Sinnathambi at that point. He was from Sri Lanka. He had been working in the economics and development sector for the last 20 years. And he said, Rakhi, your job is not to sit on the desk. I know you can, after Oxford, you're used to producing 2 essays or 3 essays a day. You're used to, that is your constructive output, but you need to get your hands dirty and you need to go to field. CARE had operations across 20 states of India. It had 600 people on its staff working on programs related from health. This was a tribal village in the south of India. And I was meant to go there to expose myself. This was a humbling moment. You believe that empowered with a degree, you have a sense to give. And while I was there, every case and every program I read, I was only learning and taking back. 3 months into my job, the scenario changed. This was in 2005. The tsunami struck southern India, and my boss and the entire team's effort were diverted and prioritized to the immediate relief and rehabilitation efforts. I just want to pause here and say, if I was overwhelmed before of trying to be of help and use in a normal scenario, this was even more unnerving. I was lucky to be working with a team of 40 people who went to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and tried to understand what does recovery and rehabilitation mean in such a scenario. What you see here is a program of the European Commission that worked with CARE to create a space for children, because it was not so much about the schooling that they missed. The psychosocial care required them to actually recover and go over their trauma through play. And I began to understand and appreciate how much social efforts also require for us to have lighter entertainment moments, learning moments. So it was not so easy to separate a very hard economic microfinance model from a community-based model. They really do go hand in hand. So that's why we bring this slide back. Anyone who's working in social business will give you a very neat business model that they are working in, a very profitable, neat model. But what they will also be able to tell you when you look at the back end of this is the level of community engagement and work that is actually invested in before an idea of a social business does come up. Professor Yunus spent 25 years in creating, crafting, working with the women entrepreneurs, working with the community before creating the Grameen, before establishing the Grameen Bank as it is today. And this is similar, while let's say the running time and we don't have to replicate and invent the wheel, the initial investment into understanding communities is extremely, extremely important. And today, if you look at the right corner, the traditional businesses, the ones who actually work on their corporate social responsibility programs, or like Danone, on actual strategic partnership, they invest and work with the agencies that are very much grounded. And social enterprises too are working with not-for-profit charitable organizations that have the trust and are working to empower the communities. So after 2 years of working at CARE, getting over the initial fears of being able to respond in a humanitarian organization, I had my second aha moment. Now, while I was actually thinking about working in government, perhaps the World Bank, and maybe a degree in development economics would serve me good, I decided to go back to school. But why an MBA? Those 2 years on the field and meeting Ashoka fellows and social entrepreneurs while I was in Bangladesh made me really eager and inquisitive about leadership and management. I was very keen to understand and know how private sector approaches could be applied and adapted to address very scalable, to address social problems that need to be addressed at scale. I went to business school. I was accepted at Harvard for a 2-year program, in the MBA program. And what might be interesting to hear now, as I reflect back on some statements and statement of purpose and essay questions, my application looked quite different than when I had applied to Oxford. While I was applying for my MBA at Harvard and other business schools, the seed of social enterprise was planted. I was really looking to make a difference and understand the role of leadership management in running large organizations. So here's a picture which was easier to locate and find. This is my class of 90. The entire class is of 900 in the year, and the smaller cohort is of 90. And if you spot me, I'm on the second row at the very end, at the back. And this is a class which typically, going to business school, do come from the consulting and the banking field. And while one doesn't want to be completely an outlier, I was amazed to also learn that there were leaders who had experience working in military. There were nonprofit leaders who had actually worked on the field for many, many years. They were from the music, from the arts, from theater, the scientists, a doctor from across the river. And while that might be a smaller population, a smaller interest group, it really became a community. Over close to, I would say, 600 cases, each of us were put on the spot to defend our point of view in a trustworthy and a safe space. So it was the perfect time for me to actually go into depths and try to understand more about the setup of social business. While in 2009, it was still an established concept, not as much as it is now, I met Dr. Sharma again. Dr. Sharma on the left is the founder of the Rickshaw Bank. He came to speak at the India conference at Harvard Business School. And on the right is Jacqueline, the book of Jacqueline Novarakis, The Blue Sweater. She is an alumnus of the Stanford Business School, who worked firstly with the formal financial service market. And during she's also on the club of the Social Enterprise Club of Harvard. And speaking to those who had actually taken a second or a third career leap, so let's say social enterprise or social businesses was their second or third career, here is Rakhi looking to graduate and wondering whether it can be a first career. Can I begin my career working in social business? Does that make sense? Is that a smart move or not such a smart move? And what Pradeep Dr. Sharma has done in India with the Rickshaw Bank are kind of examples that the Acumen Fund that was set up by Jacqueline Novogratz invests in. It's an impact investing fund that invests in social business ideas. So as you can start to see, there's a whole ecosystem of doers, of supporters, right policy, the community that goes into actually creating that social business idea and making that impact on the ground. The third, and for now, the last aha moment, turning entrepreneurial and taking the leap. So if you remember up till now, the idea was to join a social venture fund or perhaps work again for care. I had also spent 6 months or a year working at the Rabobank, working on microfinance and financial services. But the idea for me to launch my own enterprise had never crossed my mind. During the India conference where Dr. Sharma was presenting, this was 2009. It was when the financial crisis had just beset the US, and there was an affordable housing crisis in India. He who was catering to rickshaw pullers so that the people who were plying the rickshaws were sleeping on the road every day. There's a slight issue with the computer. Okay. While we wait for the computer to come back, I hope I can go ahead with a few slides here. Let me take that back, sorry. Give me a second. Okay. This is asked us for a reflection and a pause now because I think the PowerPoint had crashed. A stretch break. In another 10 minutes, if we come back to it, we'll be done. Otherwise, you'll hear me go over. Unfortunately, I am seeing that it's not as happy to come back. Right. I will try to send the presentation over. There are really a few slides to go. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think I might be lucky, or we all might be lucky. I'm sorry about that. Let's see if this does work now. Do you see the slide now? Okay, you do. Okay, let's hope it works. And it was too heavy to send over, so that would have taken another process in itself. I would backup plan for next time. So you might be thinking that Rakhi's spoken a lot about work, career, lots of aha moments, taking the leap, turning entrepreneur. There's a lot out there, right? So the leap really did happen when I was finishing my second year, my last year. It was 2009, subprime crisis, affordable housing crisis in India. Cities are growing. But what I didn't share with you, and it had to be this moment, was that I also met my husband, Marco, when I was in Bangladesh. He's an Italian architect. You can pretty much guess where he is on the left picture in the middle. I'm with Juan from Peru, an Ashoka fellow as well. And we are in West Bengal in India just after spending 2 months in Bangladesh. And what you see on the right is Marco and me at graduation in Boston on campus. And at this time, we are pretty much committed. We got married a few months earlier, that same January. And by July, we had taken the plunge into starting MHS City Lab. So it was a joint leap. Let me share with you a little bit about housing crisis in India, and happy to get into more, or you can reach out to me after today if you're interested on the theme and subject. Perhaps some architects and designers out there who might have more questions. So the affordable housing crisis in India is overwhelming. And a social enterprise as a startup has very little space to actually impact at scale. But what a social enterprise can do is start to put that seed and a few ideas of disruption. And that's the timing and the moment we saw. Yes, I could have waited another 3 years to get more experience after an MBA at business school. Yes, I could have worked for the World Bank and tried to get all the money required to build up the houses. But there was an urgency to act. And I felt that given my experiences and being in the field, the timing was now. So Mark and I got together and we tried to understand the scale of the problem. This is not an issue that either of us had worked on before. 400 million people that live in urban areas. So as you can see, very little compared to the full population of India of over 1 billion. Majority still live in rural or rural-like areas. And the rest who do live in the cities live in extremely dense settlements. And you will not hear me saying slums, right? We call them informal areas of the city. The mission of MHS was threefold: work with communities, design services and products that are affordable, and have a vision for socially inclusive and resilient cities. And here I'd like to bring in some elements of social enterprise that you might have heard me speak about also before. What makes you get this itchy feet? Why do you sort of feel the need to react? You see a suboptimal situation, that is a problem. The problem is flipped over into an opportunity because of an initial idea or an innovation. In my case, it was a class I was doing on real estate while at HBS, where we were coming up with alternate models for housing, looking at rental housing as a possibility. And that sparked the idea that there could be some innovation here. You build your theory of change, which can be very unique to every organization. And you keep pivoting as necessary because feedback from the users and the market is important. You can go it alone, but you try to fundraise, at least for support in kind, if not some funds, yourself, your friends, your family, and the rest of the world. I was lucky to get a fellowship from Harvard Business School for the summer to take that first leap. But behind you, at the back of your mind, you're always thinking about impact first. How can I do well and do good at the same time? So this is a case of homelessness in the streets of Delhi. This could be very much a rickshaw puller who has his bike parked by, who needs to live in the city to be able to start work the next morning. Marco was the architect, and with a team of the interdisciplinary team of designers, sociologists, other students from St. Stephen's College, my first university, we began to do night visits to speak to organizations that worked with homeless. And homeless, as you know, are invisible in the city. But what might be very different about homeless in India's context compared to some other cities, at least 50% of the homeless are working homeless. The other 50% could be families who are deprived and need a host of services and support system. The other 50% are able-bodied men who find this is the cheapest housing solution to be on the streets. Working with a local organization, we designed a dormitory shelter. This was set up in the winter of Delhi. I spoke about the 45 degrees heat. I did not mention that the cold in Delhi goes up to 1 degree Celsius, so it gets very cold. A lot of the deaths in the winter are related to the cold, and that's the reason the government gave this piece of land for the winter shelter. And you might ask, where is the social business model, right? The homeless families and the individuals you saw in the street are actually paying a price for that little piece of the road. They are paying a price to actually keep their documents safe. They are paying a price to watch a movie ever so often outdoors. They are paying a price for their health, for a tiffin or a meal. Bundled together, there are products and services where there is a chance to at least recover a piece of that operation investment. So that organization that we were working with would not only serve 100, but could serve 200, 300. And Delhi has over 100,000 homeless. A second project was with families. We were told that while we had catered to homeless working men, families didn't have an option. And these families moved from construction site to construction site. And when Delhi was hosting the Commonwealth Games, the sporting games in 2010 and 11, there were a lot of construction workers. So what you see here is a homeless family. The only innovation, the missing link, was this welded piece that allowed a tent, very much like a decathlon tent, to be self-standing. Otherwise, there was no way to dig into a mud patch, a decathlon tent. So this gave protection against the mosquitoes, the summer, and prevented flooding and water around. The organization that we were working here, in this case, the same as the dormitory shelter, was selling, raised funds for this, for the first pilot of 100 tents, and then was looking to give it to the contractors and the laborers, that the construction company that manages the site. So what I will share with you, that sometimes we see a problem. We look at this context as informal housing, and we see this as a problem. But if you were to talk to communities, they would be telling you that this is their best solution. This is a prototype that has all the opportunity to be improved. Speaking to a microfinance client, she had taken a loan of $80 to start her tailoring store. This is in Bangalore. Asking her where she lived, she mentioned in 2 streets just behind her store. Over a lunch break, we went to visit her store. And I said, but your house would have taken a lot more money to build. Where did that financing come from? Very much like a startup. Friends, family, and high interest rates. Now, for startups, it's always goodwill. Unfortunately, for her case, she actually used some of her microfinance loan. also to build a house. And she built it incrementally over time, adding tiles on the floor, adding a bathroom, waterproofing the roof, incrementally over time. But 20% of her loan amount was diverted for a housing need. We contacted that microfinance organization, created a new housing finance product where an incremental housing loan could be given to their clients, their customers, and not for 1 year, for a longer duration of time. One last story about Lakshmi, who is the babysitter of our daughter Nora, who was born in Delhi. Lakshmi also looked extremely troubled one day, and we understood after speaking to her that she seemed to be in high debt. And what we understood is that it was a case of bad budgeting. In India, we say that marriages and housing have no upper limits. There's a social pressure to show society your social status. It happens with each one of us. And for her, she was sending money back to her village to build a home. An estimate that started with $2,000 escalated to $10,000, and she was out of money. Nobody would be willing to lend to her. Marco, this is where you see him as the architect, began working in the communities where they were microfinance clients, understanding the housing and the design process. I had mentioned we had convinced one microfinance organization to give a housing loan, and our team of architects would go and design the houses with them, charging an architect's fee of 3%. But again, door-to-door advisory, door-to-door banking is expensive. And this is some backlash that microfinance sector has got as a critique. We are now experimenting with digital tools as a way to make access possible. The tools are free for the homeowner, in this case, Shanta, to use, the mason or the contractor who's an informal sector worker. It's free. It's been funded by programs of Cisco's corporate social responsibility. And the paying model, the software model that we have is that the microfinance institutions and the lenders, they pay our organization a fee for using the tool to estimate the amount of the loan. I would like to conclude with some reflections, and I was debating whether I should call this confessions or reflections. So the first is that the choice of working on a social enterprise really happened by default, as you see. So that's the first confession. But keeping it going for 10 years has been a story of persistence and has been by design. This is our self-built office on the rooftop of our house, informally made, no permissions required or asked. On the left below is our team of architects, designers, students who worked with us. And on the right is a team from the Yale School of Management who spent 6 months with us in helping us think through some of our new ideas and innovations. I went back to campus to celebrate my 10th year reunion 2 years ago, in 2019. And some of the reflections I share with you are from my time then. As social entrepreneurs, yes, the challenge in front is daunting, but we are eternal optimists. Moving the needle is where it begins. I was also told by my professor there, Rakhi, this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. So we definitely need times and moments for perspective. My teaching at Franklin and interacting with you students now is for that perspective. We need to re-energize ourselves. It often becomes a lifestyle choice. Not always fun, but it becomes a lifestyle choice or uncertainty. Here we have a husband-wife team, we work together. The highs are highs and the lows are lows. And we have to prepare for this. There is a great community. I have to call out to my family, the supporters, the fellowships we received from the education institutions that I've been to, the funders who continue to back us, believing that we see light at the end of the tunnel. And every book I read, whether it's in my sporting domain or in the entrepreneurship domain, is about how you pick yourself up after you've fallen. And I would end by saying what has been unique to me is that even if it keeps us awake a few nights and many nights, it's still the reason we wake up every morning. And to the seniors, the TASIS class of 2021, a few words humbly shared. Take any more opportunity you have to challenge yourself and be challenged. Embrace the unknown, because that's in where lies the aha moments. And even if life seems to be going smooth, and it should, and bless you all, it will, continue to question the status quo. And in taking that leap of faith, humbly, with compassion and humility, you'll discover your purpose. Sorry for running over today. Thank you for taking the time to be here this evening. We have a few social media outreaches where you can know Emmet's story, but of course, do reach out to me if you want to know anything about my personal journey in this discovery. I will start to screen share. Thankfully, it did reach out and accommodate. I know there are a few who have to be going out quite soon for an 8 o'clock curfew time. And for the rest who are here, looking forward to some interaction. Thank you again.